Hello, my name is Barbara Colm, and I have the pleasure and the privilege to run the second last event of the Tour de Raison that the Ayn Rand Center in Romania has set up, and under the leadership of Mariela Pescu, who really did a wonderful job by organizing 3 days of debates. As you all know, the Free Market Roadshow could not stop now in Romania, so this is why we are running it digitally, and it's a great pleasure to cooperate not only with the Ayn Rand Center but also with the Romanian American University. And my name is Barbara Colm. I host and I direct the Free Market Roadshow, and this time it is about disruptive innovation. It is a digital event, and I have the great pleasure to welcome Martin Gundinger, who is one of our senior economists at the Austrian Center in Vienna, and also working with the Hayek Institute. Martin is an economist. He has just recently given testimony at the Houses of Parliament as an expert on the Austrian budget that you can imagine has been totally changed within a couple of days. And Martin will cover a whole bunch of topics right now, many of them related to individual freedom, to how far, where does government intervention start, where does it end, big data, what resentments do we see, but also what if government is sneaking into our private lives, and governments have apps to follow us and follow those people who are affected with coronavirus, and face recognition, etc. All those systems. Martin will discuss that. As a young individual, he probably has a total different approach than many of the people who are elder and who are not so much familiar with technology, and what technology, if not used in the right way, can do. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Martin. Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak here. And thank you also to Mirella for setting up the event. It's great. My first topic I want to touch upon is individual freedom. So the effects of the measures on individual freedom. Of course, what we are seeing now is that individual freedoms are restricted in almost all countries all over the world. And what we also see is that there are some countries which we at least I didn't really expect, which didn't restrict individual freedoms that much. For example, the freedom intervention in Sweden is an exception, and I think it's pretty remarkable that socialists tend to not restrict freedoms as much as at least proclaimed liberals do. The people were made dependent on the state by these measures, and it and they are now dependent for the state to help them because they are not allowed to work. And the question now is, will they find a way back to being at least mostly independent from the state again? And I think that's a huge issue we will be dealing with in the next few years. Also, the people are demanding from the governments that they should provide them with a sense of security, with safety, and the governments, of course, are happy to do that. But they, in exchange, they want our liberties. They are taking some of our basic liberties. And one area we are seeing that is with all the apps, with all the facial recognition, which is now going on, facial recognition, also taking big data instruments, taking technologies just so that they can detect people which may have coronavirus. And after the coronavirus, the big question is, how will these technologies which are now implemented, how will they be used after coronavirus, after they are not necessary for what they are used now. So this is a huge issue. Another huge issue is the data centralization, which is taking place. There are tendencies that data is centralized more and more, and this is not just an issue because governments are getting more and more power over people. It's also an issue because the, this is a huge vulnerability if data is centralized because hackers, for example, have much better access or can at least attack the data or get the data much easier if the data is centralized, for example, in government databases. And all this is taking place despite tendencies in technologies which actually go towards decentralization. Just think about blockchain, for example. Just think about the monetary revolution which is taking place with currencies. Just think about decentralized web, which is also a topic which was big a few years or even a few months ago. So how will this turn out? I'm unfortunately not sure because what's now taking place could easily also lead to a reversal of all these decentralization tendencies of the last few years. It really depends. Um, and what's also really dangerous is that these measures, which were implemented now, could be used as a basis for totalitarian systems, and this is why their implementation is very risky. Um, the question now is: will these measures only be temporary, or are they here to stay? And my fear is that, at least for the most part, they are here to stay, as government measures are only very seldom temporary. And that's also, for example, what Milton Friedman said about government programs. Um, but still, the fight for the abolishment of these measures is crucial, even though I fear that this is a losing battle. As most people are unfortunately okay with giving up their freedom to gain safety in effect, or at least the illusion of safety. But still, it is, as I said, a battle that has to be fought. But at the same time, I think it's crucial that we educate people on what they can do individually to protect their liberties or make it harder for governments, at least, to restrict them. And there are many possible countermeasures. One, for example, is use proxies, use encryption tools wherever possible, and this is probably the most important piece of advice I can give. Be careful with which data you provide in every instance, because if data is published, it is here to stay. You won't get rid of data in most cases. And all these countermeasures, don't just use them for stuff which might be problematic considering the law, but for everything you do. You're not only helping yourself by doing that, but all the people you are in contact as well. This I I would say this concludes my first part on individual liberties, and let me now go a little bit into globalization. Um, of course, what we saw in the last few weeks is that global supply chains have completely broken down, and there's a strong push from politicians to bring back core industries to the countries, because they saw now that in times of crisis it is very it's not easy to get products they need, for example, medical products in the countries because all the borders closed. So, of course, politicians now want to get the core industries back. The question is, how will they make this this happen? And I fear that it's possibly via protectionist measures, duties, because this tends to be the easiest route in the short term and also the easiest route for politicians. The other route, of course, and the route I would prefer, is just lower taxes, lower regulation, so that industries come back, because it's pretty cheap to produce in this country. But unfortunately, I doubt this will happen, at least in the next few years. I think there may be a chance that this will happen after countries see that their protectionist measures reduces the wealth in all countries, and of course also in their own. Maybe this will lead them to rethink the policies. But for the next few years, I fear that this is not going to happen. Of course, the protectionist policies also have a strong potential for increasing tensions between countries. And keep in mind the statement, which is often said, Bastiat said, when goods don't cross borders, soldiers will. And of course, I think it is pretty logical that there is a possibility for a war in the coming years because of that. I hope there will be none, but protectionism definitely increases the chances of that happening. And as said, I hope I'm wrong, but I think there's a realistic possibility at least. The last point, Barbara.
No, no, go ahead.
Okay. The last point I wanted to make is on resentments, and this is related to what I already said on globalization, but now broken down on the individual level. Who will pay for the costs of the crisis? I think this is an important topic, and I think we have to distinguish here between costs of corona, so of the disease, of the virus, and costs of government measures. I think this distinguishing between these two is really crucial, because there can be I think that there can be made a good case that the cost of corona should be borne by businesses, because it's a business risk in essence. But the cost of corona measures, who should pay this cost? Should it be paid by businesses? Should it be paid by taxpayers? I think from an ethical perspective, the the best case would probably be for the voters of the parties in power, that they should be paid, that they should pay the cost. But of course, this is only theoretically a discussion, because there's no way out who voted the parties which are now in power into power. We just can't know. So it's probably the taxpayers which will have to pay again. And of course, I don't think that people which were against the corona measures, which were which even didn't think that the costs will be so high, will be very happy about that. And I think that there will be a great push again to say, well, let the others pay, as it always is. Let the others pay, just not me. And yeah, this I think there will be huge conflicts. There will be huge social social conflicts because of that, and we'll see how that works out. But these are big challenges which lie ahead of us. I
Well,
think I can conclude here at this point.
Well, thank you, Martin. I think you put up a couple of very important points that are important to individuals who love freedom and who want to be responsible and self-responsible. You mentioned at the very beginning that obviously some people like to be restricted or like to be protected by government. How can we make sure that those people understand that their individual freedom is at risk? What can we do to make them understand that, once freedom is lost, it's gone, and then we will have to fight a long fight to get it back again?
Um, I think we have to show people again what the value of liberty is. And I think that many people, because many people just don't know what real liberty is, how, and they also don't want responsibility, because nowadays it's easy to just get rid of responsibility, just let the state do it, let others do it. Why should I take responsibility? Taking responsibility is pretty hard. And I think most people just don't know how to take responsibility anymore, and they have no respect anymore for individual freedom. Honestly, I don't know a good route to bring those people back to
Well,
loving freedom, but
what
still,
about
we try.
what about telling them that they have to bear the consequences of their actions? Usually, everything is taken off everybody's shoulders. From the cradle to the grave, the state is there and takes care. Well, I would argue, and I hope you agree with me, that we need to help those who cannot help themselves. I think that's definitely a task of our society or of us as individuals. But
Of course,
you must not put it as bluntly and say, "Hey, let the state do it." Um, we have our own minds, we have our own hearts and souls and intelligence that we can handle things and solve problems. Why has
of
this
course.
become so evident at this specific crisis that people just rely on government? Do you have an idea why we delegate responsibility?
Well, it's easy. It's just easy. And nowadays, I think people love to take the easy route. People just don't they just why should they take risk? Why should they take the hard route if other people provide them the easy route? There's no real benefit, or at least people don't see the real benefit of taking the hard route anymore. It's I think it has to do with taxes, of course. It has to do with that there's this whole redistribution scheme we have, not just regarding money, but redistributing everything. I think that because of that, it just don't really pays off anymore to take the hard route, to really push yourself.
Well, we talked about taxes with Michael Yeager 2 sessions before. I would not like to dig into that too much right now. But you mentioned one thing, one of my favorite social philosophers, namely Frederic Bastiat, the Frenchman who actually said, when goods cross borders, weapons won't. So in times of dividing labor, and global exchange, what would you do? What would you think will happen next? Will we be more protectionist because of the crisis, or will it be a global solution? And then I have a couple of questions here on the screen, but let's quickly jump onto that.
Well, yeah, I think at least in the short term we will be much more protectionist. How it pays out in the middle and long term, I'm really not sure. It could go both directions, but I don't think that in the short term there will be a solution to being less protectionist. I think in the short term it's pretty clear we are going the protectionist route. And I also have to say that this already began long before Corona with Trump, with Brexit to a degree. But I think regarding protectionism, we also have to distinguish between economic globalization and political globalization. And I think the only globalization which is worth protecting is the economic one.
It's a division of labor. It's creating better jobs, better products, better goods for everybody, making goods achievable and affordable for other people, rising them out of poverty. So, in other words, markets, free markets. Would you agree on that? Yeah. Good. And
I agree.
let me just come back to the issue of big data. You are a different generation than I am, and I have my issues, to be honest, with big data. And you mentioned very clearly that certain apps that are provided by governments or facial recognition, etc., are something that you probably do not like. But you are one of those generations that grew up with Facebook, with all the new modern tools, with everything. Where is this resentment? Where is the up and the downside? Could you just elaborate for 1-2 minutes on that again before we close down?
Of course. Well, personally, I'm not a social media guy, not at all. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I I don't have Instagram, not at all. Why don't I have that? Well, because I'm very careful about my data. I really don't like to be online too much. I think you really have to think very carefully about which data you publish about yourself, which data goes on the internet. The reason I'm so careful is because I know what uh, what can be done with data once it's on the internet, once it's out in the public. And most people, unfortunately, and yeah, most people today just don't really know what is possible with the data. They look to the government to protect them, to protect their data even, when the only person that can protect their own data is themselves.
Well,
Nobody else can protect your data, even if you think so, but it's an illusion.
but
The
then we
only
are
person who can protect the data is yourself.
Well, but then we are back to this individualism and to the self-responsibility that has been preached so often in the past, and that we should also take care if how we deal with this so-called or with this crisis, with this health crisis. I mean, it's our own responsibility who we meet, when we meet, how we interact with those people. And how which public transports we use and how we use them, etc. I think it comes back to us as individuals who think and act and make those decisions.
Yeah, of course, I agree.
Well, Martin, well, then let me thank you for joining. It's been a great conversation. You really took a great tour d'horizon, starting from individual freedom over big data to go over globalization and then ending up with the resentments that we see and face all these days. Martin, thanks for joining. It's been a pleasure. I will see you very soon in our office in Vienna again. I also want to thank the Ayn Rand Center in Romania, especially Mariela Pascu and her team for organizing and hosting us, and also the Romanian American University. And as you know, this is the Free Market Roadshow, and we have many, many, many international partners. Without their support and help, this would not be possible. Apart from that, there are many individuals. It's professors, it's teachers, it's business people, it's entrepreneurs, it's people who work in the libertarian pro-market, free market movement, who have joined us at the roadshow and who will continue to do so. So it's just an interruption with the digital roadshow, but we will continue to meet live. And the next session will start at 4 o'clock. We will discuss the euro and the monetary system with Thomas Bachheimer. Stay tuned. I will be back at 4 o'clock. See you soon. Thank you.